cannot avoid us. How about we do that? Here's a phrase for you. Carpe per diem, seize the expense account. Well, our chairman of the board didn't snicker at that one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
So you didn't need to. Carpe per diem. Yeah, carpe per diem, seize the expense account.
All right.
That's, carpe diem is seize the day. So carpe per diem is seize the expense account. That's all. It was silly. Okay, let's share this over to the TWiRT page. There we go. Share. Suncast, I'm guessing you can find out if this is properly on YouTube. Or maybe you just have to trust that it is. I don't know. I don't trust YouTube. Let's see if we can share this over to the Broadcasting Club. Or I love all. Yeah, let's do the Broadcasting Club. Why not? Oh, good.
Yay.
Good. All right. So we got about a minute and a half countdown before the show. So I'm going to hit Star and Frank Foti as being on the show. Sorry for the wind noise. Best I could do. All right. I think we're shared about everywhere. Let me run over to my page and make sure. Yes. And let me mention Frank and Chris there. Okay. Good. Frank, I heard from a friend of yours about today's show, Mark Tennant.
Yeah, Mark's part of Syndicate of Sounds, and Mark's also my play-by-play buddy in doing the Worldwide Blue Devil Network for Wycliffe High School.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful. Yeah, he sent me a nice email last night.
Mark's a good guy. I'm sure he'll be checking out our little adventure here today.
Well, and I mentioned to Mark, he asked, is it live or recorded? I said, yeah, it's both. We do it live, and then we top and tail it, and if there are any technical errors in the show, we Suncast fixes those, and we publish it. And within a few hours of it being published, Frank, probably tomorrow sometime, I will, Frank, send you some links to the show, and I'll include Mark as well, so that you can download a video copy or an audio copy or whatever. And of course the YouTube reference as well. I wish the sky wasn't blown out behind me, but it's getting a little gray today anyway, so it's not that big deal. All right, I guess we are ready to go, and let's roll into it. Hey, everybody on the network, we're about to go live. We're about to go to the recorded portion here shortly, and it's episode 626. Frank Foti is our guest about something that is pretty different for all of us. I can't wait to talk about it. Chris Tarr is here. Yay! Must be feeling better. And so we'll start the show in 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, and we're at the Southern Command of This Week in Radio Tech. We are live here in Lauderdale by the Sea. Yeah, we're right next to the Atlantic Ocean. I'm sorry the camera's kind of blown out there. What do you expect with a $69 camera? But we are right next to the ocean and the beach and all that here. I'm at Plunge Beach Resort in Lauderdale by the Sea, just north of Miami, about a 45-minute to an hour drive north of Miami. So that's where I am. I've been here for a few days and just taking a few days of R&R back to the work at Telos Alliance in just a few days. All right. Let's check in our co-host. He's rested. He's ready. He's feeling better. He's breathing deeply. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Chris Tarr. Chris, good to see you.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I'm surviving. I'm vertical.
Okay.
I'm awake. And I am not in Florida, so I am totally jealous. I'm here in beautiful Mukwonago, Wisconsin, although we kind of got a little taste of springtime. Temperatures have been actually pretty nice, and it sounds like we're going to get to a warm streak here over the next couple of days. So it's like a little taste of spring, but I just keep reminding myself it's still winter. It's only January. We still have time to get hit, so we'll see where that goes. But yes, I am. Last week I was a little still recovering from my pneumonia, still recovering from it, still moving around kind of slow, but I'm here, and that's what matters.
Well, it's good to see you, and I mean that in all sincerity. Good to see you. Vertical. Glad you're recovering. And our guest is here, and that's a man that I came to love as a fellow engineer and admire as an inventor, and eventually a CEO and chairman of the board of Telos Alliance. And that's a guy who's I've looked up to him for a long time. He is taller than me, but that's not hard to do. But he's also a fantastic asset to the whole radio and audio industry. It's Frank Foti. Hey, Frank, welcome in. Good to see you.
Hey, Kirk, how are you? And, you guys are all talking about your locations. Maybe I should say that I'm coming to you, from the Shady Rest, of Petticoat Junction. And then you can change the song to say, and there's Frankie Foe. He's a moving kind of slow at the junction.
That's oh man, what a great show that was! And you and trains. I mean, that kind of all ties together, doesn't it?
Real quick story. When I would that show came on Tuesday nights on CBS, and it was right after the Red Skelton Hour, and I'm probably in second grade, and my bedtime was right when Petticoat Junction came on. And my mom would let me stay up just long enough to see the opening credits because the train came through. Well, the only times I was able to see the show would be in the summer if it was in reruns, or if I was sick and staying home from school, she'd let me stay up. I'd fall asleep on the couch. But there was something about that show that I always loved. And if you're wondering, yes, I have the Hooterville Cannonball in HO scale.
Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Oh my goodness. What a great time to be alive when that show was on weekly instead of, there's probably a whole channel for it on Pluto. So Frank and I and Chris are going to be talking about an audio experience that's a little different than audio processing, but it's something that's interested Frank for years, and he has made it come true, and he's done some pretty amazing things with it. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Nautel, and the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinars, they're on hiatus until February. So a few more weeks, they'll be on hiatus, and they'll restart again in February. We'll update you on when you can go register for the next ones with Jeff Welton hosting that. But I want you to think about the GV series of Nautel FM transmitters. And I got to tell you, of all the Nautel transmitters that I have personally seen out there, I probably see more GVs than anything else, because I get to a lot of transmitter sites and see these new beautiful GV transmitters. Now, this is the line that's available from 3.5 kilowatts up to 80 kilowatts. So there's some big transmitters available. They do HD radio if you're in an area where they do DRM. You can get them for DRM, and of course regular FM as well. And I should have asked Chris Tarr before offering his opinion here. Chris, do you yourself take care of any GV transmitters?
As a matter of fact, I do. I just installed one. I just installed one last year, and I'm installing another one here in about a month. Love them. They're great transmitters, easy to set up. I can actually, with the power installed, I can have one commissioned in about 30 minutes. They're that intuitive. They're that intuitive. You plug in the frequency, the power level, and basically make sure everything's hooked up, press the on button. And reliable. The one I've had, the one I put in, actually, I think it's been a little bit more than a year now. I've not had a single failure with it, knock on wood. Just a really reliable transmitter. Nautel has fantastic support. So, yeah, I love the GV series. They're great transmitters.
Well, it turns out that I'm the owner of one, a GV10, and I'm about to be a part owner of another one or two of them coming up as we increase power on a couple of our stations in Mississippi. Although it's been my friend Russell Lafferty who has installed them and hooked up remote control. So anyway, Nautel.com, check it out, and check out the GV series of transmitters. They're very popular, and there's good reasons why they are. Stay tuned, because we will let you know when Transmission Talk Tuesday comes around for more shows that you can participate in as a roundtable in February. Thanks, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, let's jump right into our topic with Frank Foti. Frank, and I know you were working on it before you showed it to me because you had it just about perfected, but I visited your office a few years ago before COVID hit, and you were telling me about some surround sound, and I hesitate to call it upmixing, because upmixing can be just filling channels, and this is a lot different than filling channels. Tell me what we're talking about, please.
Well, I mean, in many ways, Kirk, it is upmixing. And before I get into that aspect, I think it's probably worth sharing how it all came about.
Yeah.
Many years ago, probably 15 to 20 years ago, Steve Church and I started doing some work with regard to what we felt would have given HD radio like a real wonderful wow factor. Because, it's to my view that, HD radio, when you switch from conventional FM to HD, I mean, okay, there's a little bit of a change in the texture, but there's not like a wow factor. HD television, when we went from 525, lines of resolution to what we have, that was a wow factor. And the reason I say this is that we had come to learn that Fraunhofer in Germany had come up with a way to pack 5.1 audio into a two-channel stream by encapsulating the surround cues in his metadata, and then on the receiver side, you basically put it all back together, and it's discrete 5.1 audio. Well, at that time, the music industry and the CD or the platform industry was trying to promote SACDs and DVD audio discs, where they were selling, discrete surround sound material. So we did this work, and we had it working, and with the idea to, put this in the HD radio system. And then lo and behold, the music industry decided to scrap SACDs and DVD audio discs. Meanwhile, we got to thinking, look, even if there isn't enough stuff there in content, if you're going to broadcast in surround, you need to have everything in surround. So we started looking into ways of coming up with, what would be, you used the term upmixing, some application to do this. Fraunhofer came up with something, and it worked okay. It sounded kind of weird, if I may say so. And other people, when you think back all the way to the 1970s, when those, what we would refer to as, quadraphonic audio, it was basically just matrix methods utilizing, either phasing or time delay or reverb or things of that nature to create this effect. And what we're doing is not that, or to, bring the story around full circle. I had this idea that if, given stereo audio as your source, when we listen in stereo, we have the left channel, the right channel, and then, most music is recorded, if there's a vocal, where the vocal is coming out of the center. Well, we all know that in stereo, there is no center per se. There's no center speaker. It's what we call like a virtual center. So I started thinking, if there's a way that I could take stereo and derive an actual center channel signal, then I can, use that along with the existing stereo material to come up with, left surround, left front, right surround, right front. And basically, that's what we do. Now, what took so long was, while I had the idea probably 10, 15 years ago, was, the 1956 tube model brain here to come up with the mechanism on how to do it. And once I did, then it's like, things kind of took off from there. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, the best thing I can tell you guys is that there was a period that I was working really hard on it, and I was about a 2 week period, and I was pulling a lot of all nighters at the office and sleeping on the couch and things of that nature. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I got it working to where everything was falling into place, and I was dead tired. And I'm like, okay, it's great. Just turn it off, go home, take a shower, get some sleep, come back and play with it tomorrow. I was so excited. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was so excited. I literally sat in my office downtown Cleveland and played with the doggone thing till about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, put the Who on. How does Bob O'Reilly sound? How do the Beatles sound? How does this sound? And I was, as a developer, you're always struggling with yourself because you hear things and you think, oh yeah, that's really cool, that's really great. But then you have to come back and say, well, is it? I mean, am I just fooling myself? And it wasn't until like the following week at the office where I would drag in a handful of our coworkers. I remember, Kirk, you had a chance to hear it. Our buddy Jake Alderman, he was working in Cleveland at the time. He came in, and Greg Shea's son Brian came. All these, they came in. They're like, Frank, wow, that's amazing. And that's when I figured, okay, if some of our crew think it's got legs, well, maybe it does. And then not long thereafter, I had reason to be at our office in Minnesota, at Minnetonka. And while I was there, our friend Gary Katz, the producer of Steely Dan, happened to be there. We were working on some stuff. And I asked Gary, I said, look, I've been working on this thing, blah, blah, blah. Based on all the work you've, award-winning work you've done with Steely Dan, I'd appreciate some feedback. And oh, by the way, if it sucks, it's okay. You can't hurt my feelings. And Gary gave it the thumbs up. And he basically said, look, as a producer, I can tell you about different elements, this, that, or the other thing, but I'm not technical like you are. And if you're looking for like some technical feedback, I can get you that. I'm like, all right. And he said, it'll involve a plane ride. Okay. Next thing you know, a few weeks later, Gary and I are on a plane to London. And we end up at this little old building in St. John's Wood. Some of you may know as Abbey Road. And we're demoing it for Giles Martin and Hugh Padgham and a host of other well-known, recording engineers, producers, to which they're like, Frank, this is pretty cool. And Hugh Padgham, who's got a long, laundry list of success. I'd been out to dinner with him the night before because he's an old friend of Gary's. And Hugh, I think we all had been, let's just say we dipped into the oil a little bit. And Hugh had said, Frank, I'm enjoying our conversation, but I've heard a lot of these gizmos, and quite honestly, they all suck. And I said, well, Hugh, I agree with you. He said, so I'm going into this thing tomorrow a bit jaded. I said, all right. But I told him, I said, look, if it, as a developer, if you don't like it, you can't hurt my feelings, because all you're doing is you're giving me information on what I got to go back and work on. And I'm telling you this because as we were leaving the restaurant that night, I said, let's stack the deck. I said, give me some music that you want to hear. He goes, oh, that's easy. He goes, my reference song, if I'm listening in a new studio, set of speakers, what have you, is The Police, Every Breath You Take. Fair enough. So the next day we get everything set up at Abbey Road, which was, that in and of itself is probably worth a whole other episode, which was, how does some snot-nosed kid from Wickliffe, Ohio get to go to Abbey Road? And Hugh comes in, we cue up the song, we play it, and he's literally walking, to each speaker. And there were these amazing Bowers and Wilkins speakers. I'd never heard anything so, excuse my language, damn good in my life. And he's listening, and he's got a furrowed brow, and I'm thinking, oh boy, you're about to get your ass kicked. And when the song ended, he came over next to me and he took his elbow and he jabbed it in my side, and he just went, "What the F did you do?" I said, "Why?" He goes, "That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. He goes, can we play more stuff?" I said, "Hugh, I didn't come all the way to London to play one song." So we had all afternoon. I think we started at about 2:00, and we sat there for hours. There was Hugh Padgham, Gary Katz, myself. There were people from the BBC and others, and we just kept throwing music at this thing. I mean, stuff I'd done, but watching them. And the coup de grace, and then I'll shut up, was, these famous people, it's kind of, again, I'll use the word surreal, because they talk about other famous people. Like I'd say, "Oh, Kirk and Chris," and Hugh says, he goes, "Phil and I did, we used to do a lot of work with George." I'm thinking, Phil Collins, because he produced Phil Collins in Genesis. Thinking, George Martin, this was because all this had happened maybe a couple of years after Mr. Martin had passed away. He goes, "And the whole time we've been here, we haven't listened to anything from the boys." So at Abbey Road, we pull up and played Golden Slumbers from the album Abbey Road. And gentlemen, I'm not ashamed to tell you the following. The room we were in had this vaulted ceiling with skylights, and we're listening to the song. And I'd listened to the album through the system many times. But at that facility, I looked up through those skylights and I said to myself, to the souls of Mr. Martin, Mr. Lennon, and Mr. Harrison, "Gentlemen, I pray that I'm not offending you." And when I looked down, I had tears coming down, because you could have heard a pin drop in that room. It was one of those like religious, surreal experiences, because we were listening to their material in surround sound that was done at that building, many years prior. So, beyond having people hear it, I'm happy to go into more detail about things that you guys might want to know about, but that's the long and short of how the thing is came to become what's known as deja vu, with this little venture that myself and a couple other colleagues have created, known as Syndicate of Sound.
Frank, this is I'm on the edge of my chair. Literally, this is really good info. I love the storytelling and the information, and we're going to hear more in a minute. I want to hear about the Syndicate of Sound, and how is this being applied now? How are you lighting up people's minds and ears and smiles and hearts in actually putting this technology to use? We're going to take a quick break. Our show is brought to you in part by some other friends in England, and that is our friends at Broadcast Bionics. Chris Tarr and me and Frank Foti are along with you here on this episode of This Week in Radio Tech. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Wow, the Bionic Studio will really help you make better content and not work any harder. Check them out at bionics.co.uk or check their links out here in the show notes of this show on YouTube or on Facebook. Check it out. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring this week of Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack here in Lauderdale by the Sea in Florida. I'm at the Plunge Beach Resort, taking a few days off. Almost done with vacation, though, and back at work in the office in Nashville. Chris Tarr is here from Mukwonago, Wisconsin, where it's gotten a bit warmer. And Frank Foti is our guest. Frank is talking about a new project he's been working on actually for years. And things are really coming into fruition, amazingly, even during COVID. And here, as we get out of COVID, he's got some experiences to tell about. Frank, wow, I started hearing about these listening parties, for lack of a better term, that you were doing. Would you like to tell us about that?
Sure. About a year ago, here in the Cleveland area, one of my cohorts in this little venture, a buddy by the name of Mark Tennant, who's part of Syndicate of Sounds, Mark had an idea of what, could we apply the tech in a live venue or like in a nightclub? And I mean, the short answer is we could apply it basically anywhere. And so we got together with a nightclub here in Cleveland called the Music Box. And Mark and I went down and met with a gentleman by the name of Mike Miller, who's the owner of the Music Box, and explained what our tech does. And Mike said, "Is there any way you can come down and we can do a test in our auditorium?" I said, "Sure." So we went down. They set up, speaker system. We got it running, and and I think we used Golden Slumbers to demo the system. And Mike right away was like, "That's amazing." He's like, "That's unbelievable." So the idea that came about by way of Mike and Mark was to create like these listening parties. And we've done probably, I don't know, 10 or so, where we've taken like a classic album or a couple at each event, and we present them in, this upmixed fashion. And we, our tech we call deja vu. And the reason being is it's like hearing your favorite music for the first time all over again. So the first one we did, which was last February, we did a wonderful evening where we presented the Steely Dan album, Asia, and then we did Katie Lied. And the reason we did Asia was on account of, as I was working on all this tech, I was having lunch with Gary Katz one day. Gary was their longtime producer and produced Asia. And I was telling him about the things that Steve and I had tried to do with HD radio, and of which I had purchased like Gaucho and Nightfly and Kamakiriad. And I said, "Gary, all this stuff, those albums exist in 5.1. Why not Asia? Probably the most famous Steely Dan album of all." And Gary, who kind of like just deadpanned it, and he goes, "Never happened." And I'm thinking, there's got to be a reason why. you know, I mean, we mean never happened. He goes, impossible. I'm like, Gary, I don't mean to pry, but now you've got my hackles up. Not to argue, but you know, you don't mind sharing. Why is that? And what ended up happening was the last album that the band owed their original record label, ABC Dunhill, was ended up being Asia. And when they finished all the production on it, Donald Fagen, there were 7 songs on the album. Donald Fagen said to Walter Becker, I'm going to take 4 of the multi-track masters home. You take the other 3, and we'll keep them for posterity. Well, Walter Becker at the time was living in a beachfront home in Santa Monica, California, and he had like a storage area in the floorboard of his house. And he shoved the tapes in this floorboard. Well, most of us, you know, if you got radio engineers on this, or any engineers, you know that salt air doesn't treat things very nicely. So the salt air actually destroyed the master tapes to the song Asia and what is it? I think with Black Friday, you know, the first song on the album. So because of that, they don't have all of the multi-tracks to redo something in surround. So on account of that, I'm like, let's do Asia. And we did. And our guest that night, we brought him in by way of Zoom, was Gary Katz. And Gary was on with us for about 45 minutes, telling just the most wonderful stories about some of the makings of Asia, some, you know, interesting things about the band Steely Dan. And I can honestly tell you guys, because I was sitting on stage with Mike Miller, because we talked about how everything was going to work. The place was packed, it was sold out, and people's jaws were literally hitting the floor as Gary's telling these great stories about, you know, various songs on Asia, and it was heartwarming. And then we, you know, presented the album, and beforehand because we talked to Gary, we said, so Gary, you know, we're doing Asia. What's your favorite Steely Dan album? We'll play that in surround. He goes, that's easy. Please play Katie Lied. So that was the second one we did. And then, like I said, we've done a number of them more, the last of which was another one of those, you know, that just kind of gives you that like larger than life experience. We did Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Revolver. And that was the place was packed, and people were like just beside themselves because they were listening to the Beatles again in a way that they've never heard before. And it was, you know, I mean, I literally was at the venue for an hour after everything was done because people just wanted to talk about, like, you know, I heard things in the song Tomorrow Never Knows that I'd never heard before, and blah, 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 this and blah, 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 that. And I have to tell you guys, when you see people light up in a wonderful way, you know, that, and they're touched by the sonic experience, it's truly better than a paycheck, or it is. Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that. You know, it's like, you know, even with like, you know, our audio processing stuff, and I see some program director or station manager or engineer get all excited because of the sound that's coming out of their radio, and our product had something to do with it. That's what matters most for me. And this whole little deja vu thing, you know, Syndicate of Sounds, it's really heartwarming to say it modestly.
Frank, I'd love to spend a few more minutes talking about this emotional experience of hearing something so familiar, like a song. I was a disc jockey. People ask me, "Do you like this song? Do you like that song from the '70s or the '80s?" Well, I liked it the first million times. After that, it got a little old, right? And I think a lot of disc jockeys kind of feel that way. And I know you, Frank, have listened to some songs and even parts of songs over and over and over again to get an algorithm just right. Well, but this concept of the joy that we feel when we experience something the same but a little better, and music is such an emotional field anyway. But when we experience music in a better way than we've ever heard it before, it's to me it's especially touching. And I'll crank it back over to you in a sec, but and I won't take long to tell us. Years ago, I got off a plane in Cleveland, Ohio, one night to come to Telos, and it was probably a Sunday night. I got off a plane, and this was before Uber and Lyft were popular yet, so I was still renting cars. And so I got the rental car, and I get in, I crank up whatever rock station it was still. It was probably NCX in Cleveland,
Probably.
and they were playing a Fleetwood Mac song. I don't remember which one, and I thought, wow, I've never heard this song quite like this before. I love the way this sounds. And so I got into the office the next day, and I honestly I don't remember if I was asking you or Mark Manolio or maybe Cornelius Gould, but I asked somebody, hey, is NCX using our new processor, the new Omnia 6, back when that was new? And they said, well, yeah, we put it on there. That's what they're running. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just heard a Fleetwood Mac song like I'd never heard it before, and it was amazing, and it made my heart jump. It thrilled my head, and honestly, Frank, I felt the same way when I first heard the Omni 11, and then the same way when I heard the Omni 11 with the G-force in it, and Omnia 9's got its own nice characteristics too, and I'd like for you to give me your thoughts, and Chris, please feel welcome to jump in too, but your thoughts on why this is so good for the human heart and mind and even soul to hear something new and like better, like, oh my gosh, that sounds good.
Well, Kirk, you're touching on something that is real. I mean, I've had this discussion with other professional engineers, one of which is Grammy Award winner Frank Filipetti, who's also heard this tech. And I'll share, by way of Frank, an audio processing story to the same thing, that there's something that when you're presenting something, and it just kind of like I don't want to say consumes you, but in its own intimate way comes in and just gives you this feeling of, you know, I know this is a cliche word, but like warmth or joy, that, there good things are happening there. And Frank told me a story. And by the way, this is probably one of the reasons why that helped, and it's a background thing, mind you. I was not the program director of the talent, but probably the things that helped Z100, because we put, a lot of what Omnia is the original Z100 sound. And Frank Filipetti told me this story once. He said, he goes, in 1985, you and I knew each other, but we didn't know each other. And I said, I don't, you got me there, my friend. We're both Italian, and our initials are FF. He's FF1, I'm FF2. And he was telling me this story because, some of the artists he's produced, or one of which was Carly Simon. I happened to be at Frank's house, and we were evaluating this tech. He said, Frank, Carly was sitting right where you're at, and we were mixing. We're doing a final mix on some song or some album that they were working on. And they're listening and listening, and she kept going, no, Frank, that's not it. No, Frank, that's not it. So after about an hour, after he'd been playing with the EQ and the, whatever level of processing and all that kind of stuff, she said, come with me. And he said, okay. And they got up, and they went and they got in her car, and she turned the radio on, and she goes, make my record sound like this. And it was Z100. It was the station that and the point is, Carly knew nothing about production or audio processing or anything like that, but there was something coming over the radio that captured her. And Frank said, he goes, I sat there and I listened with her, and she was right. There was something about it that was larger than life. And even there were some comments made, about a year ago. This documentary came out about Z100 called, From Worst to First, the true story of Z100 New York. And they talk about the audio. Tom Pohlman, who's, way up there at iHeart, said, there's something magical about the sound of this radio station, and he's talking about, when it was back in the day and yours truly was, cutting his teeth on designing processing stuff in New York City. And Tom was a college student at Cornell University. But, for people to just become enraptured with what they're hearing, there's something there. And I will tell you guys this, that, Steve and I, church, we would always talk about things of that nature of like, you're working on something, an algorithm or some application that you're trying to achieve, and you're working on it to the point of where it, where it's almost like you feel like you can't live without it, and that's why, when I got this thing working, I ended up sitting in my office dead tired till 2:00 in the morning, because it just, sure, it was great listening to Bob O'Reilly coming all around me, but there was something beside it that just gave me like this ethereal feeling, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's like the Shunmook disc or I ran like, a green Sharpie around the edge of the CD. It probably comes down to the attention to detail, probably the what could I put, like the magic, if you will, without sitting here and going into all the minute details as to how the algorithms work, the things that give it this emotionally beneficial sound. And I will tell you, and then I'll, shut up, is that maybe that's the reason why through all the years in either evaluating the sound of a radio station I was either working for or developing things, or a competitor, be it a competing radio station or competitor's processor, where you'd hit something and go, oh, something's wrong there. You don't know why, but it is an emotional experience. And by the way, guys, I've done it in like developing stuff for myself. It's like, I'll say, by design, it all looks great. And, you get it going. And then it's like, whoa, I think we need, it needs attention. Something's not right there. And it's not until you get this, where it gives you that warm fuzzy, then you're onto something. So I apologize that I'm not offering up any, technical details as to why, but there's something to it. There is something to the psychological, that whole phrase of psychoacoustic. It's real, and and by the way, it's affected all of us. Kirk, you had your story about WNCX, and Chris, I'm sure you probably have a handful of them yourself, and when you're able to achieve that, it's like achieving like an audio nirvana, if you will.
We're going to take a break in a second. Chris Tarr, though, I wonder if you might relate to us in 30 seconds or less your experience with audio processing of dead air and how somebody like that. What was that? What happened?
We when we put in our first Omni 11, we had the program director. I didn't tell him what was going on. I just put it in and started, playing with it. And he comes, running down the hall. What did you do? What did you do? And, so we were, I told him the story, and I went down to his office and we were talking. He's like, man, that thing even makes silence sound good. But, to relate to what Frank was saying, I'm not a loud guy. I don't, we're in a competitive market, but I really don't like to process for loudness. I like to have drama, I guess is the best way to put it. And one of my coworkers, when I first started working with Dave Magnum and Magnum Media, they had an 11 that was kind of set, by somebody who was just playing with knobs. And I came in and I did some tweaking. And the word he used was, it was an experience. He's like, I turned it on and I smiled. It was like this experience. And to me, that's kind of the greatest compliment. It's not louder than everybody else, but you definitely know when you're listening to it. And I think that, when we live in the days of MP3s and earbuds and everything else, when you can tune something or create something that, allows you to experience the music and experience the nuances in the music, I think it's when you start hitting home runs.
Kirk, if I could share along those lines, years ago we had a situation in Boston where the Fine Arts Station WCRB, they put an 11 on the air, and their program director he said to me, set it up as if you were processing the Moody Blues, Nights in White Satin. So we did, and literally CRB was on par with the album rock station in loudness. We're going for loudness, and Tony Riddell's the program director. And about 3 weeks later, he calls me up and he goes, I need you to come back to Boston. And I thought maybe something was wrong. I said, sure. Why? What's up? He said, the gentleman, because CRB is publicly funded. He said, the gentleman that's our top donor to the radio station and has like a technically trained ear. He'd always call up Tony and say, this sounds good, this sounds bad, whatnot, so forth. The guy called him up and said, wow, I want to compliment you on the sound of WCRB because I want to thank you for finally getting rid of that goddamn audio processing. And Tony said, what are you talking about? He goes, we're using processing. He said, no, you're not. He goes, I'm listening to the Boston Symphony and it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And Tony said, no, he said, we have a different audio processor on the air. And the guy goes, I don't believe you. So I and Marianne Seidler, one of our coworkers, we went to Boston and we went to dinner with this gentleman. He was a wonderful man. And he sat there, we were having this Italian meal, and he said, there's not processing on WCRB. I said, oh, yes, there is. And now, why did that happen? Because all the things we're talking about happened. If you get it all just right, and Chris, you're right, it doesn't have to be the damn loudest thing on the dial. If it creates a nice experience and gives you that illusion that it's nice and exciting, you've won. You've won. So
we're going to take our next break here. Chris Tarr's going to help me out in a minute, and when we come back, Frank, I don't know how much you can reveal, how much it would be over our heads, but when you showed me, when you demonstrated your up 5.1 up mixing to me a couple 3 years ago, you did kind of lay out a little bit of a graphic as to what was going on, and I'm not expecting a graphic now, but I'm wondering if you could give us an idea of how software looks at audio and then makes decisions about what to do. So I don't know anything about how that works, and I think not a computer code treatise, but something about, well, Kirk, the software looks for these characteristics, and then it breaks it up into these things, and then it makes decisions about it, compares the left and the right, and how much is here, how much is there, and how much correlates and how much doesn't. I'd like to know some of that thing, if you can describe any of it without giving away any secrets that you can't give away, and I get that. Not that I can recreate anything you're talking about. So I'd like to understand that from Frank when he comes back. I'll let Frank stew on that and see what he can divulge. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store. And hey, I'm just down the road from BGS. They're great folks. And something you can get at BGS is Broadcast Tools. Broadcast Tools has made boxes that you need to solve problems for years. I mean, 20 plus years ago, I was using Broadcast Tools products to switch satellite channels back when the satellite receivers available had like one audio output. And yet we received, 4 different shows from one receiver, and we had to switch amongst those different shows. They make all kinds of things now that I use at some of my stations, and Chris Tarr is using something as well. Chris, I think you're using some silent sensors that have a nice web interface and can alert you and that kind of thing. What's going on with you and Broadcast Tools?
Oh, that's just one of, I have so many Broadcast Tools gadgets. I have their web remote control for remote controlling one of my sites while I'm getting the Berg stuff rolled out. But the silent sensors that they have now, the web-based silent sensors, are just fantastic. They've got Studio Hub connectors in the back. They have level indicators on the front and in the software. So you can log in. And, it used to be like with some of these silent sensor stuff where you just had a red light that kind of show peaks or whatever. And, you really wouldn't be able to tell if you're, well into that level or just at it, and a quiet song would play and trip your silent sensor off or whatever. This actually has a graph so you can monitor, how your levels are going in so you can make sure not to get false alarms. as you can see from the picture there, if you don't use the Studio Hub, they also have the terminal blocks, the Phoenix connectors. But for a place like mine where I use all Axia gear, to be able to just go right from the back of a node into the back of the broadcast tool switch is awesome. It took me literally 5 minutes to set up monitoring for 4 stations. And then you can do relay closures for alerts. You can do email. You can do web alerts, all kinds of different things. So super, super flexible. And I'll tell you what, for the functionality and for the flexibility, I don't think you can do any better at a better price. It is just it's a great little piece of gear. Can't hear you, Kirk.
Sorry about that. Don Wingett makes a number of different tools, like a lot, and you need to try them out. Check them out. You can go to the Broadcast Tools website, and you can get all that from Broadcasters General Store. They're in Ocala, Florida. These are good people. I mean, they are on top of the industry. They keep on top of trends. They work really hard. And I should know. I mean, I'm with Telos Alliance. Broadcast General Store represents Telos Alliance and Axia and Omnia and Telos and a lot of our brands. And we regularly are in touch with them, doing training and keeping them up to date on our product line. So I know these are good folks that can give you good advice as well. And they are very good about telling you how long something is going to take to deliver, whether it's available overnight, a few days, or it might be a month before you can get something. So Broadcaster General Store is the place to check that out. BGS.cc is the website, BGS.cc. Thanks a lot to Shane Finch and Jessica and everybody at Broadcasters General Store. Thanks for sponsoring the show, too. Okay. Now, Frank, I kind of set you up, and I hope I didn't step out of my lane there in asking you to describe, how does software or some of your algorithms, how do they look at incoming audio and make decisions as to what to do? What's that process about?
Kirk, this broadcast business, if I explain it all to you, I might have to kill you because you're right there by a big body of water and you'll sleep with the fishes. Reality.
Oh no,
is,
Il Padrino speaks.
There you go. There you go. I got my couple regime, Chris, over here. He'll be taking care of the family business later tonight. Actually, Kirk, to answer your question, the things we're capable of doing with software are, and this I can say with certainty, we could not even possibly do it in the analog world. We have the capability of taking a look, taking a picture of an audio signal, determining how many channels there are, like in this case, incoming, we have stereo. And in doing so, we have a linear process that's able to look at left and right and determine what is, like what I would call hard left, meaning only in the left channel, hard right, only in the right channel, what could be thought to be left front, right front, and center. And the software is able to parse all of that into the individual, let's say, realms and route it to those individual channels. What's interesting is after I got this thing going, we looked into and the process is patented. A funny thing happened one night, and this usually happens to me. I was driving home and I said, what would happen if, since I'm taking two dissimilar signals and I'm looking for something similar to isolate it, what if I were to take like processed audio where I've got something similar and dissimilar, run it through the same mechanism, what does it yield? Lo and behold, gentlemen, it yields like precision peak control, and where all the harmonic distortion is like eliminated. I don't want to say totally eliminated, but let's say it's suppressed by at least 60 to 70 dB. So this little gizmo, which is called Deja Vu, also has found its way into what'll become some new things for Omnia processing going forward. So, but to answer your question, Kirk, is things are being done in the software world. They're not, and the other thing I will tell you is that this is not a mechanism that has to um, make decisions and say, oh, the vocals, I'm hearing a guitar here, I'm going to stick it over here. It's happening based on supporting the artistic integrity of the original stereo production. So, whereas, one of the things that when I've listened to other up mixers where they do play games with either switching or time delay or phasing, um, things of that nature, you'll hear things get moved to where they don't belong. This doesn't do that. It supports the artistic integrity of how the original performance was put together.
That is something I'd like to spend a couple more minutes on, Frank. We've back in the days when I was in high school and hanging out at a Radio Shack store, they had we had quad vinyl, right, and there was all kinds of tricks played to fill up speakers and kind of make it sound like separate audio was coming there. And Frank, I've seen you give some papers on some of the techniques to uh, simulate 4 and 5.1 sound and that kind of thing, and a lot of it is just not satisfying because it's not what the artist intended. So would you talk a bit more, and maybe you've got an anecdote about this, why what you're doing has been satisfying to the artists, all who have heard it so far?
Well, Kirk, when I made the visit to Abbey Road, a friend of ours, by way of audio processing, a gentleman by the name of David Perot, who has done some amazing work in Paris and in France, in Europe actually, came up because he wanted to hear it. And David does a lot of work with the alternative artist Jean-Michel Jarre. And David said, Frank, we've got to find a way to have Jean-Michel hear this. I said, okay. So a few months later, I happened to be in Paris and I met up with David and we went to Jean-Michel's studio, where at the time he was working on putting together a box set to commemorate 50 years of performing. And Jean-Michel in his studio, because he does a lot of work in surround, so everything was set up and we were playing some of his music through it. And he told me something that at the time, I found hard to believe. He said, Frank, on this particular song, we're achieving something through the up mixer that I've not been able to achieve when I've taken the 16 or 24 track master tapes and tried to remix them for 5.1. Something's happening here in a very good way through your process, and it's in the right places, but I wasn't able to do that given the multi-tracks. So, I mean, maybe had more time been spent with the multi-tracks, maybe could have been done. But to Jean-Michel, it's like, wow, I can take stuff that has already been done in stereo and come up with something that's presented in a manner that is artistically and production correct and is appealing and appeasing to the artist. And Jean-Michel was not the only one to say this. About a year later, I happened to be back in Boston, and we were at WCRB, and Greg Hawkes, who was the keyboard player for the Cars, somehow one of our Marianne knew Greg, and we asked Greg his opinion, and he's like, wow, this is amazing. How you're achieving something that doesn't sound mechanical, doesn't sound fake. It's musical, it's natural, and everything is in the places that I would have intended had I sat down to remix the original from the multi tracks to put it in surround sound. So, when people are telling me or us this without asking, I guess we've got something working in the way that we want it to.
Well, that's amazing to hear from artists and have them tell you that it sounds musical. It sounds the way that they would have intended. And I think, Frank, that's always been one of your specialties, is to using your ears and your brain and keep things sounding musical, not just looking for loud. And yes, you're known for loud, but you're also known for keeping it very, very musical and with integrity to the original music and the original sound, and to make it pleasing to human ears, so we can listen for a long time. And
Kirk, I know last episode or a few episodes ago, you guys had a good friend of mine and colleague Cornelius Gould on, and Corny's got this wonderful little box, the C4, and the early returns and feedback on his effort is much the same. And I think it's because both Corny and I share the same view and perspective and how we go about dealing with audio signals and signal processing and effect. At the end of the day, it is an effect. I'm not going to debate that. But when you're able to achieve sonic performance that raises the bar. I know it's a cliche term. I'm sorry, but I believe we've done that, and the feedback from people has been that. I think it comes down to just having this feeling inside yourself of like, okay, I can get it here. I can get it to be quote unquote good enough, but good enough is not acceptable, and one of the reasons why I've always felt honored to work with Gary Katz is, years ago, Steve and I were out to dinner one night, and this is probably in the early days of when we were doing the MP3 work with the Zephyr. And we said, if there was like somebody in the music industry that we would want to, have ourselves judged or get feedback from, who would it be? Where somebody that, the technical quality and the performance was like second to none. And, universally, we both said Steely Dan, and to be able to get kind of like stamps of approval from that camp, I don't think it gets much better than that. It's, or to have someone like Carly Simon tell her producer, I want to sound like this,
That's right.
So that's not me. That's not me saying, yes, use our device or our application because we're telling you it's better. And we've got stuff on a website and market, we've got great marketers and all that. And I'm honored for that. But when people unbeknownst and without question on their own come forward and say, hey, this is the thing you want to be listening to. At that point, it's like, you know what, Frank, just shut up and go play with your trains.
I hear you. Frank Foti is our guest on This Week in Radio Tech. We've got just a few more minutes left in the show. Chris Tarr is along too, my amazing co-host, and I'm so glad that he's feeling better. And Chris, now that you're feeling better, maybe you can tell us something about a product that you're using in your studios. I may call it the Casino I've Won gizmo, but what do you call it?
There you go. Well, it's studio lights is really the best way to put it. I was talking to Catfish not that long ago, and with winter here, now is the time when a lot of people are doing studio work. They're building studios, remodeling studios, and we got to talking about the YellowTech lights. And, Catfish's exact words, because, he's a good guy. He said, listen, if you have the budget for them, they're gorgeous. They are fantastic. And I was like, yeah, they really are. I like them a lot, but they are pricey. And he said, well, if you're looking for something a little more affordable and you don't need them to look as nice with the brushed aluminum and everything, Angry Audio has a product too. It's very similar to that, except they use the black ABS plastic, and it's the Studio Signal Light by Angry Audio. And as you can see, they're stackable. They have multiple colors. They're just like the other product that way, just a little more affordable because of how they're designed. And if you're not, looking for that brushed aluminum, really, that premium look, these are a great alternative to that. And even better, Angry Audio sells, of course they do, they sell a gizmo for that. The gadget for that, the Studio Signal Light gadget. One of the things that I found, I put in a stack of Yellowtech lights probably 10 years ago now. And I remember trying to get all the GPIO set up with the relays and the power, and it was really hard to do. Angry Audio has the Studio Signal Light gadget, and what that is that plugs directly into those lights, and you can control the colors and the options and what they do using the box. And of course, it interfaces with Axia, and I believe with Wheatstone as well. And it powers the lights, and it controls the colors, and if they're flashing or steady on, steady off. And these work with other lights too. You don't have to use them with just the Angry Audio lights. You can use them with the Yellowtech lights as well, and it makes wiring these things up so much easier. So again, a great little gadget, and of course the lights, which are really good. I'm such a fan of those lights, and I agree with what Catfish is saying. Is, if you've got the budget to build it out and you're making showcase studios, you can't do worse than those. Or you can't do better than those, I should say, because they are just fantastic. But if you're on a budget and you still want nice looking lights that do the same thing, Angry Audio has a solution for you. So remember, when you're doing work in your studios or at your radio station and you come up with these challenges, don't get frustrated, get angry. Check out angryaudio.com for more details.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to Angry Audio. And we're going to switch to my camera here and show you something. That little box from Max Connect is bringing you my signal for this entire show. And at the resort that I'm at, they have Wi-Fi, but it's not that great, and it cuts out a lot. So who knows what's wrong there. And my own T-Mobile signal, I'm in a 5G area, and, it's got a really good download bandwidth, but the upload really sucks. And because I want you to see me and my signal here, we need good upload. Well, that's where Max Connect comes in. Max Connect, I got to tell you, not typically known for high speed, but known for high reliability. But in the place that I'm at right here, and I don't know why, I got to get Josh Bone to tell me about it, but I am getting about 30 megs down, and I'm consistently getting about 13 to 14 megs up on this Max Connect modem. And it's not the modem that does the work. It's a PepWave modem. It's the Max Connect SIM card inside. And yes, I'm on AT&T right now. I tried the Verizon, and I got better performance in right where I am here with the AT&T. Doesn't mean you're going to always get that. You can also get a T-Mobile SIM card, but the deal is you get prioritized data. And so I don't have a packet counter right here hooked up to this, but I don't think I've dropped many packets at all. This has just been so reliable. So Josh Bone at Max Connect, bravo to you for making this work so well. The results, do vary a little bit from time to time, but here at this location in Lauderdale by the Sea, I'll tell you, Max Connect is the only way that I'm able to be on video right now here at this resort. So I really appreciate Josh Bone and his great technology. And hey, maybe you don't need, a video bandwidth. Maybe you need to run a remote control. You need to see some security cameras. Maybe you need to go do an audio remote from a car dealer or a parade or a ball game. Well, Max Connect can get you outfitted because you get prioritized data. Thanks a lot, Josh Bone, for making Max Connect. Our industry needed it, and you provided it. Really appreciate that. We'll have the link at the website. It's spelled funny, maxconnect.com. Okay, we're about to finish our show, and this is the point where I put our guest on the spot. And, hey, words of wisdom. What do you want? Frank, you're the preacher. What do you want the congregation to walk out remembering about what you said? What's important? Maybe what's coming up in the future? What do you think people ought to be looking out for with regard to upmixing surround and enjoying sound and in a whole new way? What are your thoughts?
Well, Kirk, one of the things I guess I should mention is that the tech that we've been talking about is available as an application and as a plugin. You guys are talking about our friends at Angry Audio. They've licensed the tech. You can go to their website and acquire the app, or run it as a VST, as a plugin on a computer, as long as you have your own I/O, stereo in and multi-channel out. So the tech is available right now, and so it's something where if you want to do it just to have it in your own personal environment, you can. I can also tell you that because there's been a lot of talk of saying, "Oh, this is the best up mixer for music." Well, I will tell you that in the video world, it works just fine as well. One night I did a test where I grabbed my cable feed for Monday Night Football, and I took the stereo feed, ran it through it, and it was perfect. The announcers were right in the center. The field mics, which they have in stereo, were kind of like left front, right front, and the crowd was all around you. So this is a technology that's applicable for if you just want to, have it for yourself and hear music or, content like you've never heard it before. You can. It can be applied for producing things. It can be applied. We actually have, I think there's going to be a version of one of the Telos codecs that will have this in it so that, if you run stereo audio in, it'll upmix, and then using MPEG surround, it'll stream, over the internet. And the cool thing about that is that MPEG surround is a standard. So any player, be it iTunes, Winamp, Windows Media, whatever the player is in your computer, your phone, what have you, if it sees a header file in MPEG surround, it'll play 5.1 audio. So I think, rather than going so much into what's the future, just to let everyone know that this is available. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing, the website is syndicateofsounds.com. And there's videos and papers and all kinds of stuff about this, some of which we talked about here in your program, as well as links to how to acquire it if it's something you wish to do.
Wow, we'll put links in the show notes for both the Angry Audio application that people can get now, and for Syndicate of Sounds, that sounds plural, syndicateofsounds.com. And that's a really interesting and pretty website. You've got some great graphics and explanations there.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Chris Tarr, is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Because we got to go soon.
Just that it's been great. Last time I was on, we had Corny. This time, Frank. Two guys that I really, really admire. As my coworker Dave's like to say, we hitched our wagon to Telos Alliance a long time ago. So, it's really great to be seeing somebody who I just have a lot of admiration for. And one thing I would like to mention to the engineers listening, I think there's been a theme here the past few weeks where, with Corny and with Frank and what I've been preaching about the difference between loudness and quality. And you can have both, but you want to strive for both. It's, you don't win by being the loudest on the dial. You win by being best on the dial. And so just,
that's right.
If there's one thing you can take away, it's be the best on the dial.
Yep.
Man, that's
you got it, buddy. And Chris, thank you for your support all these years.
Well, Frank, thank you for being our guest, Frank. Really appreciate you taking an hour.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, the thousands of hours that went into making this hour good with your expertise. I really appreciate it very much. By the way, Frank, I look forward to seeing you in about a month. Yeah,
the last thing I'll say is that actually the whole concept was given to me by my cat, Silvio Dante, and I just had to carry it out. I do what he tells me, him and the Lewis.
And so I know, Silvio, you've got to do what he tells you.
That's right. For anyone who clicked in, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your support. Great seeing all you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Chris. We'll be back next week. We had to go Suncast. Thanks to Suncast for switching and producing today's show, and also to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. We will see you next week on This Week.